Good afternoon and welcome to this month's show. I'm Luke McCormack. During today's show, we will discuss best practices with machine learning and artificial intelligence strategies in the federal government. With me on today's show are Gregory Allen, Director of Strategy and Policy at Department of Defense Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, Sanjay Kunyani, Chief Technology Officer, Department of Labor, Brett Vaughn, Chief Artificial Intelligence Officer, Department of Navy, Erica Thomas, DoD Comptroller, Intelligent Automation Program Manager, Office of the Secretary of Defense, Jim Richburg, Field Chief Information Security Officer for Public Sector at Fortinet, Henry Sowell, CIO, Cloudera Government Solutions, and Bob Osborne, Chief Technology Officer, Global Government at ServiceNow. Well, AI certainly and artificial intelligence and RPA, a very important subject. I couldn't think of a better person to start us off. Greg, tell us about the state of the state. What's happening over in the JAIC?
Thanks for the opportunity to be with you here today. I think over the past 2 years, you've seen a real change in the mindset of the Department of Defense with respect to artificial intelligence. The types of arguments that I used to have a couple of years ago was about whether or not artificial intelligence was important and whether or not now was the right time for the department to be accelerating the adoption of artificial intelligence. That discussion is essentially over. The leadership of the department, by and large, gets it, and that's true at each of the services. That's true in the combatant commands. That's true in the Office of the Secretary of Defense. And it's just one illustration of the prioritization that the department has put on artificial intelligence. My own organization, the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, was elevated to be a direct report to the Deputy Secretary of Defense. So the number 2 person for the entire 3 million plus person Department of Defense. And as we've seen a recognition of the importance of artificial intelligence, we're also moving from one-off types of projects to sort of demonstrate and illustrate the capabilities of artificial intelligence towards thinking about what are the technical barriers that make adopting artificial intelligence difficult? And how do we make those barriers reduced so that more folks can actually implement AI capabilities with less effort and less cost? In the case of the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, we're intimately involved in many of these efforts, but I want to emphasize that there's good work being done across the entire Department of Defense. So I'll talk about 2 specific things that we're doing to sort of reduce the technical barriers and accelerate AI. The first is the Accelerating Data and AI Initiative, or ADA. Deputy Secretary of Defense Kathleen Hicks announced this effort in June 2021, and it is a really exciting opportunity for the entire Department of Defense. Essentially, what we're recognizing is that at the same time we're developing more AI-enabled capabilities in our research institutions and in our program offices, we also need to be modifying the infrastructure and approaches at the combatant commands so that these capabilities can more quickly and effectively be integrated. And also so that we can have the capabilities to ensure that different data sets coming off the real diversity of technological systems that exist in the combatant command can effectively share data and make that available for machine learning algorithms, which improve their performance as they're exposed to more and better quality and more diverse data sets. So ADA is a really exciting initiative that the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center is leading, but is really involving the activities of so many different organizations across the department, including the CIO, the CDO, and the combatant commands themselves. So that's one thing that we're up to. The second thing I'd like to highlight is the Joint Common Foundation. And this is a recognition that cloud-first software systems really need to be born in a cloud-enabled environment that enables what we call the DevSecOps approach. And for folks who don't know, there's a different mindset when you're working with cloud-first software that is delivered as a service than traditional software systems in the Department of Defense, which you might burn onto a CD-ROM, install once, and then forget about for the next 5 years. The good news is that that mindset is really being erased across the department. And so the Joint Common Foundation is a software development environment that includes not only sort of all the best practices tooling that software developers have come to expect in commercial industry, but also some of the secret sauce capabilities that AI and machine learning software in particular needs. And this is an environment that we've been working on with partners across the department for over a year now. And I'm delighted to note that we hit initial operating capability at the beginning of this year. And we've now onboarded programs from each of the armed services. And folks are actually finding that developing AI capabilities, when you do it in the Joint Common Foundation, you have a faster and more effective path to getting capabilities into the hands of your end users and then iteratively updating those systems.
Really
so that's
fantastic.
Just a sample of what's going on at the department.
Right, really fantastic to see the Jake sort of grow from these proof of concept sort of one-offs as you described to these industrial strength type capabilities, really laying the foundation down for lots of great activity to happen going forward. Sanjay, how about at Department of Labor? As I understand it, you guys got some really cool stuff going on over there. Tell us about the state of the state at labor.
Great, thank you, Luke. So I want to build off where Greg started with what's happening in defense, because we're at a bit more of a foundational level. And so I wanted to start by emphasizing that at DOL, we value emerging technologies. We're starting to make some really good headway there. But the focus is on how do we provide new opportunities to advance the mission and not just do cool things for cool sake. That's been a really important area of focus we have. It's how do you enable the mission? How are we improving the work that we're doing? Is it now a fully shared services environment for IT? Mm-hmm. At the same time, how are we thinking about the balance of how cost factors into that? So to make it a reality, there's really three foundational areas that we've been focused on. One is we've created a new CTO branch on emerging technologies. And the focus is on how do we identify, pilot, and advance emerging tech within a cabinet level agency. And this includes hiring staff that can really support, talk about, and champion the work. That's really key. We're also building an enterprise architecture and IT governance process to support the use of emerging tech. And this includes, as part of that, not just the infrastructure, but also what's the model we're using to incubate and test these new technologies that are coming in. And how does that include discovery, prioritization, doing good proof of concepts and piloting? And then a really important focus is also how do you fund? What's the funding model for that as we think about how we scale emerging tech within the department? And then most recently, we've established an enterprise-wide RPA capability for automation. So we want to be a leader in this area. And so to date, we've got 4 RPA bots that we've deployed around purchasing, acquisitions, market research, and other early tasks. We have one on data cleansing for an HR performance review that's going on. And then we have several more in the pipeline. But again, these are all very foundational starts to really get the agency to buy into the concept, see the value, and for us to make sure that the cost and the benefits are mapping out. In other cases, if it's not a good approach, we'll chalk that up to
test and evaluate, right?
Test, evaluate, fail fast, but give people the ability to experiment in a safe environment. So that's been really good. Just a couple of things that we're seeing as to how this is functioning. One is the need for education. Technology part's a lot easier than getting people to understand the value and the impact. Mm-hmm. Have discussions around costs, a responsible use of things like AI. And so that active education component, the culture change, has been really crucial to get people to want to adopt, buy in, and actually make things happen. The other is just the emphasis on the need for strong data. So we've got 2 parallel efforts. One is not just how are we doing emerging tech, but how do we make sure that we've got the data infrastructure in place so that we can fully leverage the value of AI and ML, because without those 2 things happening in combination, you really can't leverage quickly the value in that area. So again, a lot of foundational first happening here, but we're creating a strong infrastructure so that DOL can really take a lead role in this area.
Have to have that superstructure in place. You've pointed it out. Greg certainly has pointed that out. Brett, how about over at Department of Navy? I know you all have a lot of activity going on over there. Obviously, you're probably coordinating with the Jake. There's a lot of AI and ML and RPA type stuff going on in the Navy.
Yeah, absolutely, Luke. And you're absolutely right. So almost every day I work with the Jake, and over the last year or so, I've been amazed at how much AI we're actually doing cross-service. And just only recently, we developed the ability to actually discern that, right? Do an inventory and view what's going on. And it's not easy because over the last couple of decades, the technology and the terms have changed. The lexicon, the language has changed. So it's a challenge to keep up. But you know, in the Navy, I like to start out, you know, talks like these on explaining why AI is important to us. You know, if you look at strategic guidance from the president, from Congress, from our chief of naval operations, and you were to collect all the references to AI, implicit or explicit, you would find a capability target or a picture painted that for me is exponential. It's on an exponential curve. And it's significantly dependent on emerging technologies like AI. AI is not the only one. Nanotech, robotics, additive manufacturing, 5G, all in that family, right? And they're all digital and information based, heavily dependent on an underpinning of a tight and solid digital fabric. So my challenge is we're a 245-year-old organization. We weren't born digital. So we're in the middle of what I call a phase shift to become more digital, to lay the keel, that foundation you were talking about, because that is absolutely necessary if your aim is to scale technologies like AI. So that's top of mind for me. The next piece that I like to talk about is what we mean by AI when we say it. In the Navy, we recognize AI as a constellation of technologies across 5 bands. They include robotic process automation, intelligent automation, cognitive analytics, narrow AI, and even general AI. If you were to look at a single instance of AI, the key mental model that we employ is called the AI stack. And essentially what that is we always start with a problem first. We don't start with AI because AI is not this. It's not going to be a solution in every case. So break a problem down. And if AI could be the solution, we work through the stack, which means it's not just software, it's data, it's transport, it's compute, it's models, it's algorithms, and several other components that have to be composed, held, kept coherent, secured, tested and evaluated, and sustained along a consistent continuum. So that idea or notion of the stack is very important to us. And it's not just the technology. I think Sanjay said it. It's especially for me, when I look at the challenge of moving a 245-year-old organization like the Navy, steeped in culture, from its industrial roots, you know, to a more digital mindset. The challenges are technologic and they're cultural or practice or process oriented. And it's the latter that really, for me, present the most work and the most challenge. The technology is straightforward in many cases, but changing the culture and the way we think and act to do AI right is one of the biggest challenges for us. And just again, you know, problem first. We always start with, you know, looking at a challenge or a problem and even, you know, I call it the AI calculus of determining whether or not AI is even the right hammer for your given nail, right? Recently, you know, we're doing a lot, as I said initially, and I think folks would be amazed how much activity is going on. Just recently, our MQ-25 Stingray, which is the first unmanned vehicle to operate off an aircraft carrier, just successfully refueled an E-2 Hawkeye and an F-35 Joint Strike Fighter. That's happened in the last couple months. And also on September 9th, the Navy commissioned Task Force 59, which is the unmanned and AI task force for the Fifth Fleet in the Gulf. So there's a lot more going on. Those are just a couple examples of where we're headed. And
Sure.
just to cap it off, it's, if you crack open the Navy and look at, our application, a development application of AI, it's really gonna end up serving two ends. It's either gonna fuel some level of autonomy in an unmanned system, or it's gonna fuel or propel some type of decision aid. And that decision aid could be on the bridge of a ship in the middle of the ocean, or it could be back in the Pentagon. And the challenge of managing that continuum of keeping the stack solvent from, the Pentagon to the middle of the Pacific is one of the unique challenges we have as a military department.
Sure,
So,
a lot of inertia when you're rolling down the sea with an aircraft carrier. It's not a cigarette boat. You can't turn around on a dime. Erica, how about over? I love the intelligent in the title here. I know you all have a lot of activity going on over there at Department of Defense, Secretary of Defense. Tell us about what's happening over in the Comptroller's office.
Thanks, Luke. Yeah, so in Comptroller, we started what I would call an RPA program 3 years ago or so. And it's kind of morphed into now we call it intelligent automation. So we started with, okay, let's look at RPA. What's the opportunity space within our financial management programs? How can we improve our processes? And it quickly morphed beyond that. So it quickly built into not only could we identify opportunity space within our financial management processes, but could we also build a shared service, a platform that could help promulgate this technology across the department. So what we quickly did right out of the gate is we were partnering with other organizations inside of DoD. Army, for example, was one of our initial partners. And we stood up RPA infrastructure on our shared service platform. It's all hosted under Advana, which is DoD's advanced data analytic platform. That's where our RPA infrastructure resides. And we have basically stood up a shared service that any groups in DoD that are interested in moving out and starting to use technology like RPA can come and connect to the platform. It makes it a lot easier. It removes maybe not all of the barriers and some of the challenges that groups are facing, but it removes many of them. So they can start their programs and or mature and have better management and oversight of their programs. I think as of today, we have 25 different tenants on the platform across DoD, leveraging the RPA shared service platform. So that's been a really good success story. And we're planning to expand that. We have more than one RPA vendor offering on that platform. So it's actually been a really good growth opportunity, and we really haven't had to advertise that much. People have just naturally came and they've heard about it. And I think there's just really good value to the department there. That said, we started with RPA. And we all know, there are limitations to what RPA can do. It's for those standard repetitive tasks. We saw that right out of the gate as groups were submitting ideas for potential automation, ideas using RPA. They're not all good. They're not all going to be solved with RPA. A lot of them require additional technologies, potentially machine learning, AI, and things like that. So what we've done, and recently we partnered with the JAIC to do some prototypes of how can we weave in machine learning in conjunction with RPA. So how do we kind of build that continuum to develop more advanced automation solutions that go beyond just RPA technology. And I think that's going to be very exciting in the department. I know a lot of other groups have started with RPA, and just like we did, there are ideas that are getting submitted that go beyond RPA. They need machine learning, they need AI. So I think we're going to see a lot of movement in the department. And that's something that I'm excited about, and selfishly, I'm excited about for my own team as well.
Sure. And it sounds like you're really laying a lot of groundwork down there and discovering, rolling up the value chain up the stack there. Exciting time. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. We're talking about artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics processing, all kinds of good stuff. I'm going to throw it over to you, Jim. You have a unique perspective at Fortinet, right? You're seeing it across the spectrum. What are you seeing out there? Give us a sense of what's it look like across the community.
Good afternoon, Luke. This has been a great discussion, hearing the breadth of how the federal government is using this. And let me start by building on the comments Erica made. I think there's an increasing understanding and maturation in the federal government of how to do RPA. And part of the challenge now is getting in the direction of intelligent automation. But we all remember the old joke, to err is human, to really screw things up takes a computer. Using RPA to do rote tasks at speed is relatively easy. When you start introducing IA and therefore letting the algorithm have access to different sources of data, to different kinds of connections in your network, it starts pointing you in the direction of cybersecurity. And working with our federal partners, we're seeing an increased interest from them in two big areas of cybersecurity, helping them establish situational awareness, know how to deal with the torrent of data that they're getting from all of the sensors and all the cybersecurity solutions they have that are reporting into their security operations center. We recently saw a request for information from one federal agency for helping them ingest and make sense of 50 terabytes of data a day, because the reality is the poor analysts are just drowning in data. So that's a problem both for RPA and one that points in the direction of IA, intelligent automation. The second is response. We're seeing an increased interest in security automation, security orchestration and response capabilities, because it's not enough just for them to say, I sense a disturbance in the force, I see what's going on. You have to respond in real time, especially for things like ransomware. So those are the two big things. They're increasingly looking to help make sense in real time of the world from a cybersecurity perspective, and then to respond to those advanced persistent threats, which now you used to be able to say I could respond in minutes. Now with things like ransomware, you need to be able to respond in seconds before it's encrypted your machine and spread elsewhere.
Absolutely. If you're not operating in a machine-to-machine type environment, you've lost that game. Henry, how about over at Cloudera? Somebody was talking, I think it was the folks over at the Jake here, Gregory and crew, about sort of native cloud apps, right? Tell us about what's happening at Cloudera. What do you see out there as far as the community coming together in implementing these capabilities?
Yeah, thank you for having me on here first, and it's a great panel. We've already heard a lot of great content that I really can't just replace what they've said. Everything here has been pretty impressive. Some of the things that you're seeing as we talk to a lot of government clients, I was on a customer site yesterday, is that this is not a model problem. Right. This is not just a data scientist, problem. This is a major full life cycle issue. Right. And one of the things that I think is very interesting in the government space is more recognition of that, less science projects, more pursuit of actually going into production. What does that take? How do you operate across the entire data life cycle? What does that mean from a security perspective, governance, all of these different areas? How do you, at the same time, understand that full breadth, continue to have innovation? How do you support culture and a workforce that can enable that? And how do you bring in the right technologies at the right time around that front? At Cloudera, we've been doing some really interesting things. One to highlight is some of the work that we recently did at the IRS. We partnered with NVIDIA. So doing data analysis, machine learning at scale, but now also leveraging GPUs. So we've done some pretty significant advancement on fraud detection and helping to increase the speed of model production by, in some cases, almost 30 times what was previously capable. And some of those things allows you to iterate and move more quickly so that you can focus on other issues that it takes to make it to production.
And no question. I mean, the tectonic shift in technology, whether it's GPU or 5G transport or all this IoT collection of data, it's just amazing some of these new use cases that you can born out based on the use of all this technology fused together. Bob, speaking about technology and global in the title, you're seeing it from a structure standpoint. You're seeing it from a planet Earth standpoint. What are you seeing out there? Tell us, give us some insight as to what you're seeing across the community.
Well, hey, Luke, it's great to be back with you again. And what a fantastic panel and topic discussion thus far. I've really enjoyed it.
Same.
There's so many flavors of AI. And I think the mission applications that are being developed by many of the organizations and agencies that we've heard from is really remarkable. And what we do at ServiceNow is we really look at it from a practical AI approach, right? So when I talk to government agency representatives and executives around the world, there's a common theme that we see coming forward, and it really is informing the strategy that we're using going forward to assist those agencies in delivering the services by enhancing human performance in the processes that they're conducting each day, depending on the persona that they're fulfilling. So when I say that, it's really a digital experience that we're talking about. And we focus on the employee experience and enhancing employee performance by providing contextual information at the appropriate time in a process to assist that person make a better decision with fewer errors faster. We talk about the digital experience of the citizen who is consuming services from government and enhancing that experience and making it a much more personalized experience and much more interactive and easier to use. And then back to Jim's comment, I think Henry mentioned this as well, is the B2B concept of agency to agency interaction in sharing information between agencies is another digital experience that we're focusing on. And we've heard about, RPA and its utilization, where is that appropriate? What we've tried to do, and I believe we're being fairly successful and it's being adopted around the world by government agencies, is provide a native capability fully integrated into a platform that leverages data from systems of record that have already been invested in by government agencies, pulling that data in a normalized format into a data repository through which the supervised machine learning scripts can then provide that contextually at the appropriate point, elevated to where a human has to make a decision or take an action. So we automate all the routine and repetitive processes that happen each day. And those activities are fully vetted by humans before it's turned over to the RPA bots to conduct those repetitive processes. That reduces errors, it increases the speed, all the great things that we get from an RPA-like capability. But then we reserve that human decision-making where we have a policy or a legislation that says that a human has to make that decision. Mm-hmm. And Luke, it's a lot like we've always talked about. There are inherently governmental responsibilities where a government executive has to make that decision. It can't be a contractor, can't be a machine. Now we find there are inherently human activities where we've got to reserve that activity to a human decision. But we can enhance that decision by providing that contextual information that increases the performance of the employee, enhances the experience of the citizen or the other agencies that's consuming that. We do that in a fully integrated platform that's supported with multiple releases. So now the agency doesn't have to try to figure out what technology is going to work, how do I integrate that, and how do I care and feed for it. They can focus on mission applications and the really cool AI stuff, like we heard that the Navy is doing with robotic in-flight refueling, which I think is super cool.
Yeah, and fulfilling that promise to the customer, right? Whether that's the warfighter, the citizen, the business owner, the farmer, et cetera. Super important that we stay focused on that. But we're going to roll over and start talking about a specific program. Sanjay, I'm going to go over to you at Department of Labor. Give us an example of a specific program that you'd like to highlight that you all are focusing your attention on right now.
Great, thanks, Luke. So, we're doing we're from a foundational standpoint, we're doing a lot of really interesting things. Some of it's more on the road part. So recently we've been piloting a lot of form recognizer AI services at DOL to help agencies to process worker eligibility forms faster and automate the manual processes for faster, quicker approach to customer service that usually took a lot of human hours. So we're looking at that as a service that we can put out there. I think at a bit more of a complex level, our office has been partnering with DOL's Veterans and Employment Training Services pilot how AI tools can be used to more successfully transition veterans or transitioning service members, military spouses, and other active duty members to civilian employment by trying to match their skills with employer needs and education. And the current experience we've seen right now has been that transitioning service members have to navigate a sea of support and information systems that can lead to a number of challenges in finding the right opportunities. And so the pilot we're pulling together is leveraging AI to pull information from a number of sources and then adding intelligence on top of it so that vets and their spouses can be recommended with options for what might be better ways to re-enter the workforce. What's cool about this piece here is not just trying to make it easier for a really important group, but also they're looking at how you evaluate and ensure the implementation is done in a responsible and equitable way, which is another really important element when you're looking at veterans. So as we're starting to look at some of these more complex cases and piloting it out, we're eager to see what the possibilities are, not only with helping to drive that mission support, but then also how do we look at responsible AI and ensuring that it's helping to make the right decisions in an equitable way.
What a great use case, and what interesting nexus from labor over to the veterans community. I think that's fantastic. Jim, how about over at Fortinet? Give us an example of one program you'd like to highlight.
So Luke, we've been using AI in production in cybersecurity for over 10 years. And in that 10 years, we've discovered that the algorithms become more refined. They give you better predictive power. So we're getting better at that end of it. But equally important, we've discovered that not all of the data that you bring in is equally relevant. Of the trillions of records we've seen, it turns out that a handful, between 5 and 20 million pieces of security data, is enough to give you a good starting set to say, I know what's bad, I know what's good, and I know what common false positive false alarms look like. And the power of this, Luke, is it's now allowed us to take a subset of that more precise set of algorithms and this small set of data and decouple it from the data center. Not something we need the multi-billion node neural network, but something that we can say, look, here's a hardware or a software version that you can deploy in an agency as a virtual security analyst that can help you identify, triage, and even to Bob's point, be pre-programmed to say, if you see this, alert a human. If you see that, quarantine and alert a human. We've delivered that kind of capability because we're at that point in the maturity curve of developing this technology.
Fantastic. And I love the reference to a handful, and then you say 5 to 20 million, of course, in the context of trillions of records. Speaking of trillions of records, I'm going to go up to you, Greg. You talked about an absolute superstructure that you're laying down up there at the Jake. Give us an example, one program you'd like to highlight.
Sure. And before I get into the one program, let me just emphasize that artificial intelligence is a general purpose technology. So imagine it was the year 1990, and you asked, what is the DoD doing with computers? Well, a lot, right? And a lot of different types of things. And we're at a similar stage in AI where it is a technology that has application, not just to one area, but to many, many, many areas. And the Jake is involved in AI-enabled capabilities across cybersecurity, across military logistics, across command and control systems, and the stuff at the sort of pointy tip of the spear. So artificial intelligence is relevant and capable to all of those things. I'll highlight just one program that we've been up to here at the Jake in partnership with United States Cyber Command and others, which is artificial intelligence for cyber intrusion detection and for network analysis and anomaly detection. And the basics here are that the amount of cyber data flowing through a network at any given moment is extraordinary, right? All of the activity of all the transfers of that data following somewhat regular patterns, but also the occasional blip that looks different from different other types of things. And in traditional software, you would create a rule that says, anytime something comes in, looking like this, flag it for human review. And that would be a traditional software approach. But with machine learning and artificial intelligence, you don't necessarily have to tell the cyber system, this is what I'm specifically looking for, execute this rule in order to find those sorts of things. You can just give it examples of anomalies. And it will come up with the rules by itself for the best way to detect those. That's in a supervised machine learning environment. There's also unsupervised machine learning, where it can just say, I have analyzed all of your data, and here are the parts of your cyber network data that look the least like traditional traffic patterns or traditional user activities. And that really helps accelerate the speed and efficacy of our cyber warfighters and our cyber defenders, because they don't have to actually go through and manually review all of this stuff. The artificial intelligence systems can identify and prioritize what they should be working on in a given day by saying, this is the stuff that looks the most interesting, start here. And we can really use AI in cooperation with humans to accelerate their productivity or to automate routine tasks that are not a great use of their time.
A great use case there, and laid it out perfectly about just sort of taking that rote activity off the table, allowing them to focus on this higher order parts of the value chain. Henry, how about over at Cloudera? Give us a specific example that you'd like to highlight.
Well, it's unfortunate that you made me follow the Jake, but no, I think that was a really fantastic, and I love what you said there because it's applicable to so many different use cases, and it's not one where you're talking about just in a corner. It's applicable across the public sector space, specifically in the DoD. Some of the work that Cloudera is doing, we're working on predictive maintenance use cases using machine learning, which has been really fantastic for keeping airframes in the air. Right, we when you look at what was being done from a legacy perspective, you had some private on the ground doing a handwritten checklist of, did you do this? Yes, no, right. And what ended up happening? So the pilot would say, no, right. And then you'd have a maintenance problem in a month and it'd be down for several weeks. Right. But now what we're actually collecting data off of the airframe as these things are happening and realizing that, hey, given all the models and things that we know about this airframe, this part is going to go bad, and then that initiates an ordering of that part, delivery of that part. So when it comes time for maintenance, you're not having a catastrophic failure involving, at worst, a safety issue or your airframe being down for several weeks. You're down for a very short maintenance of time, and your material is already there. And it's a fun use of machine learning that has actually greatly improved some of the effectiveness of our warfighters. And then also with the DoD, doing things like not just having to do the traditional machine learning in a data center, but also bringing that out to the edge in real time. So from a healthcare environment, working with military members to say, if you're in the hospital and you have a set of you have this marker and this marker and this marker, that means that you're having a heart event, and we actually need to get a doctor involved and have intervene in that process immediately. So there's some really interesting use cases that Cloudera is working on with the DoD, and like I said, Greg, I think you hit the nail on the head. This is applicable everywhere.
Yeah, as we talked about computers in the 90s, AI in the 2020s, a great context there. All right, we're going to take another short break and we'll be right back. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. We're talking about artificial intelligence, machine learning, RPA, all kinds of great things. We're talking about a specific example. Erica, I want to come up to you and ask you to highlight one example that you'd like to tell the listening audience.
Great, thank you. I think I'll go with the prototype that we did this past year that we partnered with the Defense Innovation Unit and the JAIC to accomplish. We're actually in the process now of deploying this into production. So one of the very first automations we built for RPA was actually an automation that was doing the data entry into an accounting system to clear unmatched transactions. And it was just the data entry piece. And even as we built that automation, which was saving a significant amount of time for the groups that were using it, we recognized there was still a lot of time and effort being spent on doing the research for identifying what is the corrective action that needs to happen. What is that entry that needs to occur in the accounting system to clear that unmatched? So that was always on our list from early days of circling back to say, hey, is there additional opportunity to use other technology to make a more robust, impactful solution for our agencies? So what we did is we used machine learning and a lot of the data that is already consumed on a regular basis in Advana, which is the DoD's advanced data analytic platform, to basically build models and mature models that can predict based on how prior unmatched transactions were cleared, how we can now clear new unmatched transactions that have come into the queue. So that was our initial use case. We've built that out, we've proven it, and now we're in the process of deploying that out to defense agencies in DoD. And we're excited to get that in the hands of the users. And one thing I will note, I know we've talked about this and other people have mentioned it, in that process, we're using RPA, we're also using machine learning. And what's really good about that is you can use the models and you can also build a human in the loop. So, where we're getting some people that maybe have never used this technology involved in this for the first time, there's, a comfort level and some confidence that needs to be built. So as we have the models predicting what are those corrective actions that then the RPA portion can take over and actually perform, you can build in, and we are building in human in the loop. So it would review to make sure that what's being proposed is in fact correct before it gets into the accounting system. So we're excited to get this one rolled out and put into production.
Sounds like a fantastic capabilities, conversions, blending of this technology to create this fantastic user experience. I'm sure the operators are really excited about that. Bob, how about at ServiceNow, when you look sort of across that globe, right, on the government sector, give us an example of a really cool, use case that you'd like to highlight.
Well, I think that really what we're hearing, and Erica highlighted it, Jim was right on point, as well as Greg, is how technology is enabling people to do things better, right? So we're conditioned in our everyday lives to have virtual assistants at our fingertips, and now even voice commands, right? So we interact with technology by speaking to it, and we get this response to answer a question or solve a problem that we have. The problem is we don't know where that data came from, right? So to Jim's earlier point, it's really critical as we start to integrate more information provided through technology that we understand that this is trusted data from trusted data sources. And we call that the source systems of record, right? So if you normalize from systems of record that are trusted within the computing environment into a normalized data repository, now you can have this virtual assistant capability where the trust factor for the solution that's being proposed to help the people make decisions or answer a question or take an action is a much higher level of confidence. And that's where I see a lot of adoption in governments around the world, because as all of our panelists have mentioned previously, the amount of data that's being processed now and the amount of information that's available is beyond human ability to not only catalog, but also search through to find a solution within an acceptable time frame, within a decision or a process or an activity within a process. So we have to rely on computers to help us do that. Virtual assistants provide that. That's what I referred to earlier as contextual information, but it has to be from trusted data sources. So that's a path we're on. We see that adoption rising every day in the curve, and we're really excited to help agencies achieve those outcomes.
Fantastic use case. Brett, how about at the Navy? You talked about a lot of stuff at the kickoff here. Give us an example of one program you'd like to highlight.
Yeah, Luke. So yeah, I mentioned MQ-25 and the recent successes of the unmanned refueling drone off the aircraft carrier, the Task Force 59, the Middle East Unmanned AI Task Force.
Which is phenomenal, by the way.
Yeah, I know. It's great. It's really exciting. So I'm going to cheat. I'm going to give you a specific example, another specific example, and then go general, because we talked about the fundamentals and what we need to do at a base level. The specific example I want to give is our Navy SEALs, our special operators. They're everybody knows what they do. I can't go into a lot of specifics. I'll just say that with regard to the development application of AI, I think the typical American taxpayer would be surprised and proud of what they've been doing over the last 2 to 3 years. They are putting it to use in a very exciting in a way that makes me, as the Chief AI Officer of the Navy, very proud. In general, and this is another effort I'm really proud of because it extends across the whole service, and it's really a reaction to the recent final report of the National Security Commission on AI, which put the whole Department of Defense on a very short game clock, really. Recommended to the President and Congress that the department be AI enabled by 2025. So there's a bit of there's urgency, right? If you crack that report open, it's huge. It's like 800 pages, 100 recommendations. If you look at it in total for the services, what it says is you have some work to do in your basic service responsibilities: man, train, and equip, to be a more effective player on the AI field. And so one of the things we're doing in the Navy to address that and to fuel our speed to that goal of 2025, we are establishing AI task forces at each of our type commanders. What I mean by that is, our undersea warfare, surface warfare, aviation, special operations, and information. We are establishing task forces that address both the technologic side and the practice side. So the folks within each one of those organizations do what I call the calculus correctly, determining whether a problem can be improved with AI or not. And if it can, to develop the stack and then work the stack through their given mission area. Like Greg said, AI is a general purpose technology, but in its application, it has to be tailored and customized to a problem specific and context dependent situation. The algorithm I build or develop for a submariner is very different from the one I would build for a jet pilot. Mm-hmm. Different operating environments, different velocities, different data, different transport. The stack is different, essentially. So it's critical that we get each of those folks in those given mission areas to understand what AI is, what its potential is, and then how you craft it to answer their needs and problems. So that entire service approach to tackling both technology and practice is one thing it's come a long way over the last year. We now have one of those task forces at each of our type commanders, and they're making terrific progress. And the Task Force 59 is a slightly different animal, but again, I see it as growth, and growth in a good way, into a more, as Greg said, pointing into the spear type of direction. But it all needs to start at that fundamental level: man, train, equip across the service.
Sounds like you're getting very laser focused. Well, we're going to wrap it up with a question that I love to ask, but it always means it's towards the end of the show here. And this is paint a picture of the future. Bob, we're going to start with you at ServiceNow. You're talking to global entities, government entities across the planet. What's the demand signal out there? What's sort of in the hopper in regards to ServiceNow? What's it going to look like in 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, Luke, it's probably one of the best questions I get asked, and I really enjoy looking into the strategic future of government agencies globally. And what I see happening is this capability to bring into a common computing environment the ability for the information to be shared amongst multiple applications across an enterprise. The great thing that we're doing to help agencies of ServiceNow is that's a native capability out of the box: artificial intelligence, supervised machine learning, virtual assistant for each application, whether it's native or developed on the platform, which really expands the horizons of how that technology is available, already integrated. But really where we're driving, and what I see, Luke, is super exciting because, and I've termed it anticipatory government, but we've kind of talked about it in other areas. I know Henry mentioned it, and Jim and Greg, is that avoiding outages, collecting data to understand what's happening against what has happened, to anticipate an outage or a failure or a need or a requirement, allows you to pick through the metadata that we have in our repositories to understand and accurately predict the future, and have that capability ready to avoid an outage, avoid a bad situation, or very quickly respond to that. And I refer to that in the business sense of providing this digital experience that I mentioned previously as anticipatory government. So the technology actually offers recommendations based upon historical data that allows us to get ahead of the curve and anticipate the need before it's actually realized. That's super exciting. And when you couple that with hyper-personalized experiences based upon your persona, your job, your responsibilities, now you've got a future that's very exciting, where technology is truly in service of people, and we've elevated the performance of every person, regardless of their role, interacting with that technology. Super exciting time to be part of technology, Luke, and I'm glad to be here talking about it with this panel.
I'd love to see the convergence of the government services with the use of this technology. Henry, how about over at Cloudera? What's it going to look like in a couple of years?
It's funny. There's a quote came from a data scientist out of Strata, and it was like, it took me 3 weeks to develop a model, but it's been 11 months and it's still not deployed in production. And there's a couple of, there's a couple of different production.
Aren't we beyond that at this point?
Unfortunately not. There's a couple of different surveys out there. One set showed that 35%, only 35% of models are making it to production. Another showed only 20% were making it to production. Which is those are really hard numbers, right? So what does it take to actually make machine learning AI, get into production? And at Cloudera, that's some of the things that we are intimately concerned about, right? How do you consider the entire data lifecycle, everything from ingest, data engineering, data warehousing, making sure that it's available, then the actual machine learning data science process, and then serving it out and actually doing something with it, right? That is understanding that entire life cycle, making sure that you're also doing that in a secure and governed way, absolutely critical. So that's the things that we're focused on. And I see that many different agencies are also considering those same issues. They're seeing the same science projects that are failing, and how do we actually get things out of science projects and actually into production to make it a normal part of our process. And I think a lot of the things that you heard here today are that entire pathway is where that's going, is to making this just a normal part of what we do and actually getting things off the ground and into production and to be successful.
No doubt every federal entity looks forward to that. Jim, how about over at Fortinet? What's it going to look like in a couple of years?
So Luke, I'm going to give you two quick ones, one cybersecurity and one broader. And one of the key challenges we face in cybersecurity is the attack surface, the sheer size and complexity of our connections, the fact that we don't know what we have. And if you make architectural decisions to instrument that surface, and the instrumentation are both sensors, and AI can help you make sense of what you're seeing to know what's normal, what's abnormal, and what's abnormal and just weird from abnormal and malicious. And the instrumentation are also controls. You can respond to things in real time. So you're turning your biggest liability, the sheer size and complexity of your enterprise, into an advantage. I'm a former intelligence guy. You're making it into a big integrated collection and response platform. And that's something that actually changes the tipping point, takes the advantage away from the attacker. And second, you've talked about convergence, Luke. We're headed in a direction where we've moved from being in the office to home, and now we're talking about a hybrid future. But the reality is we want to start enabling and securing connections between the users and the computing resources and the data, regardless of where they are. That kind of smart, adaptive networking is only going to fundamentally work when you can harness AI to make it effective.
Absolutely. And speaking of that convergence, Erica, I suspect that you've got quite a pipeline over there, a lot of activity in the hopper. What's it going to look like in a couple of years as far as what capabilities you'll be rolling out there?
We do. We've got a lot of good things in the pipeline. I think three things I'm most excited to see in the coming year or three. I think one is removing additional barriers that we can. So I mentioned earlier, we have a shared service platform, and that it helps eliminate some of the barriers of entry for people getting started with things like RPA. We know there's still more. So what can we do there as a shared service to eliminate some of those additional challenges? One of the things that we've recently done is we've recently deployed an unattended RPA infrastructure that again is available for other groups to use. But we also want to look into potentially piloting, can we offer virtual workspaces within the Advana environment to do both development and runtime. So one of the challenges we still see with the groups that are connecting to various platforms is, do they have their own virtual environments today? So that's a challenge that folks are facing, and looking across the different groups that partner with us, how could we potentially offer and help address some of those issues that we're seeing? So we have a couple of things in the works there. I'm sure there will be more, but I'm excited most about the unattended as well as potential opportunities to offer virtual environments. I think the second area is really just expanding and getting more use cases that are going beyond RPA. What can we do with machine learning in conjunction with RPA, AI, but potentially even getting beyond RPA? Maybe we have some use cases that don't have any RPA components. So I think there, again, we'll be kind of building that inventory, and hopefully we'll be having more pilots, more deployments of solutions that expand into intelligent automation and AI. And then the third area, and I know we've touched on this, a number of folks have touched on this, is really kind of growing the inherent capability within our workforce. So industry partners are always super critical. They're going to remain very important. But as we really adopt and embrace emerging technology, how do we ingrain that in our government base? And that's in our culture as well as in our workforce, and getting people within the government space trained and comfortable developing this right now. I see a lot of in this space now where we've got a pretty heavy reliance on contractors, but I think as we embrace this technology across the department in DoD, there's going to be further adoption, and again, just ingraining that within our workforce and getting folks trained and comfortable with that.
Sounds fantastic, and you hear that often, so good on you. Brett, how about over at the Department of Navy? Are we going to see an autonomous F-35 landing on an aircraft carrier in 2 to 3 years? Where does it end? Where does it start?
Probably, yeah, you probably won't see that in 2 to 3 years, but I think it's important looking at the future, we talk about where we've been, where we are now, right, as a base. So, the Navy's been involved in AI for decades, since the 50s, and the inception of the discipline. We established a Navy Center for Applied Research and AI at the Naval Research Lab, 1981, and we've been very active. But most of the work that's resulted still remains, as Henry said, it's in R&D spaces or in the lab, and we need to move. So one priority for us in the next 2 to 3 years is to move a lot of that into the field. We have to start getting used to the technology. I think increased exposure will help build trust and confidence. It's one of the ways we tackle that. So that's a priority for us, is taking that good work and moving it to the field. And that, putting the 2 to 3 year window, for me, it has a technologic side and a cultural side, as Erica was talking about. On the technology side, for us, a lot of what that means about moving from the lab to the fleet is about edge AI. So it's our intent to not only upgrade our kit, our technology, but our practices to move AI, impactful AI, to the edge. And for us, that would be a ship, an aircraft, or a Navy SEAL, right? So in the next 2 to 3 years, I hope to see us make significant progress on both the technology side and the practice side of doing that. On the cultural side, as Erica mentioned, the people are so critical to this. There's a lot of talk of it when you talk about AI, it's technology, but one of the reasons AI is hard and difficult and expensive today is because of the expertise required right now. And upskilling our sailors and Marines is one of our highest priorities right now. So I hope to see progress at the whole naval education enterprise, the Navy Community College, the Naval Academy, the Naval Postgrad School, and the Naval War College, in conjunction and concert with our government partners and academia. We have strong relationships right now with a lot of what we call the AI academic club, the Stanford, MIT, Carnegie Mellon. But we hope to grow that and knit that into a cohesive fabric that will elevate our folks organically, right? And make them better equip them to do, again, the AI calculus, right? Good problem to AI matching and working through the stack, but as well as adopting those digital practices that I think are so critical and important to effective AI development and application.
Sounds super exciting, and we're all looking forward to that. Sanjay, how about at Department of Labor? You're laying that foundation down, a lot of hard work going on there. 2 to 3 years from now, what's it going to look like?
So I think building off some of the great comments that have already been discussed, I mean, we're going to be more AI and data ready. And I think that whole culture change piece is super critical. And so the way I look at it is, how do we make sure that the agency is much more attuned to how we leverage the artificial intelligence? I think data is really key also. So we need some level of maturity there as well to really be able to make a reality the possibilities here. I mean, DOL has a pretty exceptional mission of ensuring the welfare of our job seekers, enabling workers, protecting benefits and rights of workers, retiring with dignity. So there's an incredible number of areas that we could speed the eligibility determinations, free up some backlogs, really drive value and what the agency is doing. And I think everybody experiences this future of we're asked to do more with less. And that every agency I've worked at, it seems that there are more requirements coming from Congress, more need to speed things out. And there's not necessarily the same level of funding and staffing to make that happen. So that's why we're really focused on that data infrastructure. And that starts with not only our AI ML capabilities, but also with our data foundation. And so you've got faulty data, you have faulty decisions. You've got lack of quality data, you have lack of quality decisions. So we've got a parallel process that in the next couple of years, we hope will catch up to one another. One is stronger, better quality data and structured data, and then how it's going to be leveraged around our AI ML capabilities. And that foundation not only matches up with the culture change and possibilities, but then also our technical capabilities to make that happen. So we'll be looking at our foundational work. We'll be looking at how data and AI ML are going to jointly be synced and how we build up that infrastructure. And then I think we want to look at our readiness. Where are we at today? How are we continually improving not just what we're technically doing, but the conversations around it, our subcomponents, considerations, and thinking around the possibilities, and that maturity level is continuing to grow along with the technology.
That more with less concept. I know Erica double tapped on that as well. It's exciting, and I'm sure the entire user population very anxious to see that happen and be fully realized. Greg, take us home from the Jake's perspective, maybe 2 dimensions, the Jake and sort of what you see there from 2 to 3 years, maybe AI in general across the federal service. What's it look like in a couple of years?
I think the main thing that you're going to see is we're evolving from an era in which AI is difficult to implement. It requires a great deal of genius level expertise. And we're moving from that era into which an AI is sort of an expected aspect of your daily life, whether that's in the business processes in the business enterprise of the Department of Defense, or whether that's actually in warfighting operations. So to take an example from each of those domains, on the business side of the equation, the budget and financial and contracting data of the Department of Defense looks like these, phone book thick reports. And that is what passes for data. And so if you want to understand and analyze that data, you have to read hundreds or thousands of pages of documents. In some cases, such as the contracting enterprise, millions of documents. And so we actually partnered, and just by total coincidence, I've partnered with the two organizations on this call, the Navy and Advana, to create a new capability that uses machine learning and natural language processing, which is a subdomain of that, where we're going to be analyzing the budget data of the DoD and the contracting data of the DoD, so that you can actually sort of move from a report that you have to read to a cloud-enabled application that you can query and search from. So for instance, you could reach into the 60 million contracting documents, right, that the Department of Defense has executed over the past decade or so. And you could say, show me all of the contracts that look like this one. I mean, that is a very different relationship between information that a typical analyst or a typical user will have in the future from what they have today. And not only will this performance be incredible, but it will be continually updated. In working with the Advana team, I have been amazed, right? And I say, oh, I need the system to be able to do this, right? This system is still in development. I need the system to be able to do this. I need it to have this feature. And they come back to me the next day, the next week, and it's already upgraded to be, what we need the system to do. That is a totally different relationship that DoD organizations used to have with the creation of software-enabled technology. These used to be years-long development efforts, but we're totally revamping our data infrastructure. We're totally revamping our software development infrastructure so that it can respond at the speed of mission need. Now, what I was just talking to you was about the business operations side of the Department of Defense, but our mission is to deter wars and, if necessary, to fight and win those wars. And artificial intelligence will have an equal, if not greater impact, as Brett and I have been saying, at the pointy end of the spear. And there, I would, urge you to think about the evolution that we've seen in e-commerce, right? The speed at which you can just wish for something and it appears on your doorstep, or the change in taxis to app-based, ride-sharing services. Mm-hmm. These are all developments in the commercial technology sphere that are underwritten at every stage through artificial intelligence and machine learning. That is the key step that has enabled these types of services. And what I want is for our warfighters to have capabilities every bit as effective, every bit as high performing, and constantly evolving and getting better, not on a time frame of years, but on a time frame of days or weeks. That's what they deserve, and that's what America's national security needs. And I think the department is moving towards being an AI-enabled enterprise and a professionalized AI enterprise, where it's not a novelty, it's something that we're good at, it's something we do all the time.
Greg, you've painted a very inspiring future, and we really appreciate you closing us out with that. I want to thank all of you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us on this program. I'd like to thank our sponsors for supporting us on this show. I'd like to thank the good people here at Federal News Network that make this program so successful and enjoyable. And most of all, I'd like to thank you, the listening audience out there that tune into us every month. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network.